Lights flash, the crowd roars. The microphone, silver and empty, hits the stage with a dead thud that echoes like a gunshot in the sudden quiet. Michael B. Jordan stands motionless, a statue carved from stone, unyielding on the sun-scorched wooden platform. The camera, positioned too close, catches every ragged breath escaping his lungs like bitter, stale air. "Did he really say that?" The whisper spreads through the masses like a quick, hot fever. Phones are raised in a unified array, red recording dots blinking in the oppressive midday heat. His face is frozen between a razor-sharp anger and a deep, unbearable ache. In his eyes, a glimmer of outrage reflects the light. The air is thick and heavy with tension, like the moment before a summer storm breaks. A producer, a woman in a perfectly pressed suit, gesticulates desperately, her movements frantic and uncontrolled. Security, resembling black monoliths, move closer, their footsteps cautiously menacing. "It's over," someone whispers backstage, and the word rings out like a final judgment. On Twitter, the first hashtag is already exploding: Jordan controversy. The scent of hot stage lights mixes with the bitter taste of adrenaline in Michael's mouth, a salty moisture beating on his chin. The cameras don't turn off. They cannot. He takes a single step forward. His voice catches, hoarse with the untruth and the disgust that had been aimed at him. "You didn't even listen to what I said." He doesn't finish the sentence. Silence. Then, an explosion of outraged boos, shouts, comments, pure raw fury. Everything has spiraled out of control. But to understand how Michael B. Jordan, the man known for his principle and quiet dignity, found himself at the heart of Hollywood's most explosive race scandal, in a conflict that began with mud and an old shirt, we must rewind several months. Michael B. Jordan's life in his small corner of North Carolina was meticulously balanced. He was famous, yes, but principled, choosing to live quietly away from the Hollywood buzz. His principles were simple, forged on narrow backroads and in sweat-soaked gyms. Do what is right, even when no one is watching. Every morning, before the sun had fully climbed, he had his coffee. It wasn't espresso in a glamorous studio. It was dark, strong brew at Steve's Ark, a little coffee shop on the corner where no one photographed him, and where a man is a man. Within those walls, smelling of aged wood and freshly ground beans, he found a peace the flashbulbs couldn't offer. That morning, he was talking to Curtis, a lean, stubborn kid from the neighborhood who dreamed of becoming a boxer but feared his talent would never be seen. "You think you got what it takes, son?" Michael asked, his voice low, the subtle southern cadence giving his words an unshakable gravity. "I know I do, sir. Just missing the backing." Michael nodded. He understood. He had been that kid once. It shaped his character, to never play by Hollywood's rules when those rules hurt people. His principles were always in his actions, not his press releases. For instance, the old gym where he trained in his youth, the Champions Hall, was crumbling. Even the city council ignored it. Instead of donating a large sum and expecting accolades, he paid for the repairs secretly, through a local construction company. His only request was that they leave one line painted on the wall: "Endurance always wins." Or last week, when a teenager approached him to film a quick casting video, Michael didn't just help. He spent a full hour dissecting every line, ensuring the emotion was felt, not just acted. It showed he wasn't just an actor, but a man who remembered where he came from and understood the quiet, unseen, but necessary weight of responsibility. He often reflected on this, sitting on the old bench that still bore the scuff marks from a punching bag. Doing right when no one sees, that was his governing mantra. It was the foundation of his roles, his choices, his life. But as he soon learned, the very system he ignored was happy to remind him that even the greatest success offers no shield against prejudice. This year, Michael decided to quietly attend a major anti-racism festival 2 hours outside his town. Not as a celebrity, but as a supporter. He didn't want to take the stage or make grand pronouncements. He just wanted to be there. He dressed in old, clean work clothes, a faded denim shirt with rolled sleeves and sturdy boots his father called true stompers, to simply feel like part of the crowd. He took his old, dependable pickup truck, the one he used to haul materials to the Champions Hall, and drove out. The festival grounds were chaotic. The air was electric, full of noise, chanting, and the smell of fresh asphalt mixing with the sweet aroma of grilled meat. Michael pulled up to the main entry, marked by a tall, new metal fence. He was stopped by Dayton, a security guard in an overly tight uniform and a gleaming vest. Dayton was a large, burly man whose face expressed a mix of arrogance and boredom, with narrowed, suspicious eyes that immediately fixated on Michael's old truck and faded clothes. "Where you headed, friend?" Dayton asked, his voice rough as gravel, carrying a careless, superior tone. He didn't meet Michael's eyes. He looked at his hands, then at the truck's tires. "I'm here for the festival, sir. To support and maybe hear the speakers," Michael replied, maintaining his calm. He always sidestepped conflict, preferring his actions to speak for him. Dayton slowly, with exaggerated scrutiny, scanned Michael. His face twisted into a sneering grimace. "The festival? You? We got important folks here today, son. People who make a difference. Well, you sure don't look like someone making a difference in that old beater. I'm here to support the idea, not to draw attention," Michael said softly, gripping the steering wheel, fighting to keep his inner peace. He felt the internal pressure rising, that familiar feeling when his good intentions clashed with indifference and bias. It was like water hitting a rock. The water knows it's stronger, but the rock doesn't yield immediately. "Support the idea," Dayton repeated, spitting the words out with a mocking laugh. He pulled out a notepad, never looking at Michael. "We only got VIPs, press, and staff registered here. Who are you? Someone we should be looking for. You don't look like any of our sponsors, do you?" He held his gaze on Michael's skin, and that look was cold as glacial ice. "My name is Michael. I just wanted to be here. If you need ID? I need clearance. I got a list. Are you on the list?" Dayton ran a finger across the paper without even checking it. His posture screamed, "This is not your area of responsibility. You don't belong here." A trickle of people, dressed in expensive clothes and official badges, began to stream past. They threw Michael pitying, disdainful, or simply indifferent glances. The feeling of isolation intensified. Michael felt himself becoming the unwanted truth-teller, though he hadn't even opened his mouth to speak the truth yet. His truth was only in his presence, and that was enough for the system to reject him. Michael took a deep breath. "Sir, I'm here to stand for what this festival is about. I believe it matters." Dayton laughed, a short, dry burst. It was a sound like snapping kindling. "Matters? Listen, son. This is where we discuss the problems. We don't solve them right here at the entrance with every passerby who decides his old shirt is a symbol of support. Folks don't want to hear bad news or see unpleasant things at a function this important." Michael felt his patience beginning to evaporate, but he forced himself to speak slowly. "This is an anti-racism festival. You are literally using your authority to judge me by my appearance and, yes, by the color of my skin. That is the problem, isn't it?" Dayton's face turned to stone. This was the classic arrogance of opponents. They always acted confidently, even condescendingly, when exposed. His reply was a manifesto. "Don't twist my words. I'm just enforcing security rules and the dress code. We can't have just anybody strolling in here. Seems like you're just looking for trouble. Or something better to do. Turn the truck around and get on out of here. Michael felt the first small warning signs. Minor, almost invisible faults hinting at something worse. He knew his presence here was meant to be symbolic, but now it had become a conflict. He could pull out his phone, call an organizer, reveal his identity, and walk right in. But that would be a celebrity's victory, not a victory of principle. He didn't want Dayton to submit because of his fame. He wanted him to recognize his dignity as a man. He slowly raised the truck window. The humid air from the field brought the drone of machines and the flicker of light, and a strange, low resonance, like something cracking deep inside the ground. It was the premonition of disaster, the first crack in Michael's quiet world. He knew this was not the end. He began to turn the truck, his inner world consumed by deep disappointment. Was it worth it? He asked himself. Yes. He hadn't broken. He hadn't retaliated with aggression. He restrained himself, but his understanding of what was wrong with this part of society grew exponentially. He was still trying to remain rational, but his heart told him a different, more resolute response was needed here. He drove a few hundred yards from the entrance and parked near an old, abandoned warehouse. He looked back at Dayton, who was now proudly waving at a man in a shimmering suit. Dayton was proud of his superiority. His body language screamed, "I am the power here." Michael quietly spoke, watching the guard turn away. "You don't know how far this is gonna go, son. You have no idea." That was when Michael started to act. He pulled an old, dog-eared notebook from the back of his truck. For the next several hours, he worked like a mechanic fixing a complex machine. He didn't write angry tweets or call his manager. He collected facts. The almost invisible wire leading to the metal fence. The lack of proper fire exits. The improperly marked handicap parking spaces. He even photographed them. His experience helping the Champions Hall had taught him that bureaucracy and arrogance always leave a paper trail. Dayton hadn't just denied a man, he had denied the law. Weeks later, Michael continued his quiet work. He returned to the site. He told no one what had happened. He used his legal name, but never mentioned his profession. He was simply Michael, the local guy. His actions became not just revenge, but a philosophical statement, quiet persistence against the system. He sent official requests, filed declarations with local authorities, and demanded inspections. At first, over minor violations that were obvious to anyone who bothered to look but had been ignored. Every action was carefully considered, his words concise, devoid of emotional coloring. He was like Ray from the analyzed stories, calm, but his calm held a power that could rival any public brawl. In response, silence or haughtiness. "Your inquiries are being reviewed, Mr. Jordan," read an email from the city council, signed by the head of the organizing committee, who, it turned out, was Dayton's brother. Or, "Our security personnel have the authority to decide who can attend private functions. Our rules are quite rigid. This is not your area of responsibility." Michael received these rejections, passive aggression, and manipulation with a stone face. His opponents, now an entire group of influential people in positions of power, began to twist the situation, claiming he was too aggressive in his attempt to enter, downplaying the problem. They used their connections to delay the investigation. During this time, Michael met with his old friend and lawyer, Sarah. They sat in a quiet living room where Michael spread all his photographs, documents, and email printouts on the table. "Michael, this is an abuse of power, but it's pettiness," Sarah said, her brows furrowed in confusion. "You could just ignore this. Why are you doing this?" What happens next will definitely turn the world upside down. So subscribe and we'll move on. I can't, Sarah. They laughed at me. But this isn't about being offended. This is about them using an anti-racism idea to commit racism and hiding behind their titles. They presented themselves as the standard, but they're ignoring the fundamentals. I won't let that slide. Nature doesn't forgive arrogance, and bureaucracy won't forgive my quiet persistence. Sarah nodded. But this is taking months of your time. It's pulling you away from work. You don't have to prove this to them. I'm proving it to myself. I'm proving it to Curtis, and to everyone else who's ever felt dismissed when they tried to do what was right. Michael deepened his strategy. He wasn't just pursuing building codes. He found something worse. He discovered that the plan submitted to the city council for approval showed the site was not meant for a festival, but for a massive, private housing development. This was the big twist, the middle of part 1. The place supposedly celebrating equality and struggle was being used as a front to push out the local community. Now Michael was truly alone against the crowd, because those who first ignored him now actively began to avoid him, seeing him as a threat. He became the unwanted truth teller, isolated. Every evening, sitting in his truck near that same warehouse, he felt the internal pressure build. He sensed the humid air, the drone of machines, and hints of something far worse. He knew this wasn't just generator noise, it was the hum of deceit. Michael started leaking fragments of information to local, obscure blogs, using only his name and providing only facts, like reporting. "Warning, something is brewing in our town," was all his headlines said. He knew this was only the precursor, but he waited for the right moment. He waited for his opponent's arrogance to peak. The climax of their arrogance came the week before an even bigger festival, which was supposed to be the pinnacle of their political campaign. Michael received an official letter. It was a ringing, cold dialogue on paper. "We are compelled to inform you, Mr. Jordan, that your continued requests for reinspection of the festival site are deemed vexatious and harassing. Furthermore, your recent online posts alleging corruption regarding the proposed Equality Heights development, which, incidentally, will bring significant investment to our community, constitute defamation. Cease and desist all further communication. Any attempt by you to interfere with the upcoming festival or to further slander the esteemed organizing committee will result in immediate legal action. We believe you should focus on your cinematic endeavors, as local civic matters are clearly beyond your scope of expertise." The letter dripped with smug condescension. It was signed by the head of the committee, Robert, Dayton's brother. Michael took the letter, his hand steady, and pinned it to a corkboard next to the blueprints of the Equality Heights luxury development, a development that would displace 300 families. He saw his opening. The festival was tomorrow. He had two choices: retreat and let the truth die, or go public. Retreat meant his principles were just words. Go public meant risking his entire career for a cause no one else seemed to care about. Michael got into his old truck one last time. He drove not to the festival entrance, but to the television studio in the city center, where the organizing committee was holding a pre-festival press conference. He arrived silently, entering through a back door known only to staff, a secret from his past life as an intern. He bypassed security with the practiced ease of a phantom, his old clothes blending into the shadows. He stood by the sound booth, unseen, listening to Robert, Dayton's brother, deliver a slick speech about bringing unity and growth to the community. The hypocrisy was a physical weight in the room. Then, as Robert paused for dramatic effect, Michael knew his moment had come. He took a single, deliberate step toward the stage. A stagehand recognized him and froze, eyes wide. The moment was suspended, the flashbulbs, the scent of cheap cologne, the silent dread. Michael walked right up to the stage, directly behind Robert. He reached out and, with a swift, silent motion, disconnected the main microphone cord. The stage went silent. Robert turned, his smile instantly collapsing into horror. "What in the hell do you think you're doing, boy?" Robert roared, dropping the diplomatic facade. Michael stood still. He didn't speak a word. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out the rolled-up blueprint of the Equality Heights luxury development. He unfurled the mass of paper, holding it up for the dozens of cameras, all still rolling, capturing the perfect moment of confrontation. Robert lunged at him, panic in his eyes, realizing the public exposure. "That's private property. You arrogant!" He used a racial slur that cut through the silence like a thrown knife. It was coarse, ugly, and amplified by the open stage mic. The entire press conference gasped. The producer on the side stage recoiled in horror, the very woman who was supposed to uphold the festival's ideals. Michael B. Jordan, the star, the quiet man, the principal, was now staring directly into the lens of the nearest camera, every ounce of his suppressed outrage finally visible. The racial slur hung in the air, captured by 100 microphones. Robert, red-faced and panicked, screamed, "I'll have your career! You hear me? You ruined everything, you damn, a direct and ugly racial slur." Michael B. Jordan stood his ground. His face was a mask of cold, controlled fury, the same face we saw at the beginning. He made his move, not a punch, not a shout, but a single, devastating action. He pointed a steady, accusing finger at the blueprint in his other hand. "They used your money and your feelings to build their luxury home for themselves." Michael's voice boomed, now projected not by the main mic, but by a hidden lapel mic he'd been wearing the whole time. "And they call this justice." Robert, the head of the committee, lunged at him again, blind with rage, attempting to grab the blueprint. He didn't care about the cameras anymore. He cared only about destroying the evidence. He crashed into Michael, sending them both tumbling toward the edge of the stage. The producer screamed. The camera angle tilted wildly. In that chaotic, terrifying moment, with the sound of breaking wood and the press shouting, Michael knew the first battle was over. But as the flashing lights of the cameras began to multiply like angry fireflies, and the sound of distant police sirens began to rise, he realized the ultimate betrayal had just been confirmed. The police were coming, but were they coming for Robert, or for the man who dared to speak the truth? The storm had broken, but the eye of the hurricane was still yet to come. What happens next will definitely turn the world upside down, so subscribe and we'll move on. Michael, utilizing the boxer's instinct he had honed in his youth, rotated his body at the last second, cushioning his fall against the heavy wooden podium that had just been stripped of its main microphone. He lay still for a moment, the blueprint of Equality Heights, the instrument of Robert's undoing, clutched tightly in his hand. The air was a maelstrom of noise. The shouting of reporters, the muffled static from the sound booth, and the escalating howl of approaching sirens. Security personnel, the same black monoliths mentioned earlier, finally burst forward, not sure who to apprehend. A hand, small and trembling, reached for Michael. It was the producer, the woman in the press suit, her perfect composure now shattered. Her eyes, wide and horrified, were fixed not on Michael, but on Robert, who was struggling to his feet, disoriented and spitting dust. "The mic? The lapel mic? Was it live?" she whispered to Michael, her voice frantic, a desperate prayer. Michael simply stood up, dusting off the faded denim shirt that had caused all this trouble. He didn't answer her, but he knew. The moment Robert dropped the diplomatic facade and used that ugly racial slur, it wasn't just a private outburst, it was a confession, broadcast live into the press pool's recording devices via the redundant audio channel Michael had anticipated. Robert spotted the producer's horrified face and screamed, pointing a shaky finger at Michael. "He attacked me! He illegally obtained private plans! Arrest him!" He's trying to destroy our movement. Michael held his gaze, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury, the same face we saw at the beginning. He made his move, not a punch, not a shout, but a single, devastating action. He pointed a steady, accusing finger at the blueprint in his other hand. They used your money and your feelings to build their luxury home for themselves. Michael's voice boomed, clear and steady, amplified by that invisible microphone. And they call this justice. Just then, 2 city police officers, alerted by the studio's internal alarm system and the initial commotion, stepped onto the stage. They were followed by 2 plainclothes detectives who had been observing the press conference from the back. The detective, a woman named Reynolds with an expression of weary skepticism, cut through the noise. Everyone freeze. Robert, you need to calm down. Robert didn't calm down. He lunged again, this time at the detective. He's a trespasser. He's slandering my name. I demand you arrest this criminal. His desperation was palpable, his reputation dissolving in real time. Detective Reynolds ignored Robert's flailing. She looked at Michael, recognizing him despite the work clothes, not from the big screen, but from the local news reports and the quiet, persistent, yet anonymous public records requests he had filed over the last few months. Mr. Jordan, I'd like to see that document you're holding, and I'd like to hear the recording from the sound booth. The producer, realizing the magnitude of the slander and the exposure of the massive development scheme, nodded sharply to the sound engineer. Play back the last minute. Now! The engineer, a young man who looked sick to his stomach, hit play. The audio, raw, unfiltered, and hideous, filled the room. Robert's arrogant roar about Michael ruining his career, followed by the explicit, violent racial slur, echoed in the dead silence. Then Michael's steady voice. They used your money and your feelings to build their luxury home for themselves. And they call this justice. The sound of the stage giving way. Then silence. Detective Reynolds didn't need any more evidence. The racial slur alone was enough to flip the narrative and justify Michael's preemptive action. The blueprint in Michael's hand, detailing the luxury condos destined for the site of the low-income housing, was the final confirmation of the organizing committee's deep-seated betrayal. Michael handed the blueprint to Reynolds. The building permits were filed under a shell company, Community Uplift Ventures. They were diverting funds meant for local infrastructure projects and using the anti-racism festival as a shield to justify the closure and eviction of the residents around the old factory district for this luxury project. The truth was out. Robert was swiftly detained. His initial petty arrogance, mirrored by his brother Dayton at the festival gate, had culminated in a public, career-shattering act of pure prejudice, all caught on camera. Within hours, the world outside the small studio went ballistic. The initial #Jordan controversy was instantly drowned out by Robert exposed and Equality Heights scam. The video clip of Robert's outburst went viral faster than any movie trailer. Michael, the silent activist in the faded denim shirt, became the unlikely symbol of resistance against institutional hypocrisy. His phone, which he had left in the truck, was a dead thing. But his lawyer, Sarah, was already in the air, flying in to manage the media storm and the legal fallout. She handled the legal side with the same quiet competence Michael had shown in his investigations. The immediate consequence was immense. The state attorney general launched an official inquiry. The big festival, scheduled for the next day, was instantly canceled. Dayton, the arrogant guard, was revealed to be a city employee on his brother's payroll and was summarily dismissed. His humiliation was total, rooted in the very old clothes he had mocked. But Michael faced his own immediate, quiet cost. By the end of the day, his publicist, a man who believed image was everything, called him with a single, panicked message, 2 major corporate endorsements, one for a luxury watch brand and one for a soda company, had been immediately suspended, citing unprofessional and violent conduct. "They don't care about the truth, Michael," the publicist said, his voice clipped and cold. "They care about quiet, easy money. And you brought them loud, expensive trouble." Michael looked out the window of his quiet hotel room where Sarah had installed him. The streets outside were already filling with protesters, not against Michael, but chanting justice for the Heights. He felt the weight of the fight, the loss of millions, but the feeling was quickly replaced by a profound, deep-seated peace. He hadn't fought for the money. He had fought for the principle. The cost was acceptable. The next day, Michael avoided the cameras and the noise. He went to the Champions Hall, the old gym he had secretly repaired months ago. He found Curtis, the lean kid who wanted to box, hitting the heavy bag with a ferocious, renewed energy. Curtis stopped, seeing Michael in the doorway. He dropped his gloves. "Mr. Jordan," he said, reverence in his voice, "I saw the news. They said you got arrested, then they said you were a hero. What happened?" Michael leaned against the old wall where the phrase, "Endurance always wins," was painted. "I just finished what I started, son. And I used the truth as my weapon." Curtis looked around the repaired, but still humble gym. "You know, everyone here finally figured out who paid for the new roof. It wasn't the city. It was just you." Quietly, Michael simply smiled. This was the real victory. Not the headlines, but the quiet confirmation from the people he fought for. 6 months later, the dust had settled. Robert and his associates were facing federal charges for corruption and fraud. The Equality Heights project was permanently scrapped. The land was formally transferred back to the community for genuine, subsidized housing development and a large park, a project Michael agreed to officially support, ensuring the process was transparent from the start. The Champions Hall received a new, massive influx of local, genuine support. Michael had gained a new kind of fame, not the kind that comes from the box office, but the kind that comes from being right. The public loved the story of the A-lister in the old clothes who took on institutional racism and won, not with a script, but with a blueprint. His career was richer, more principled, and more selective than ever. Michael sat one last time at Steve's Ark, enjoying his dark, strong coffee. The air smelled of aged wood and freshly ground beans. He was wearing a new, tailored shirt, but beneath it, his principles remained the same. A small child, no older than 10, approached his table. "Mr. Jordan? My mom says thank you. We get to stay in our home now." Michael reached out and gently shook the child's hand. He didn't say he was welcome. He didn't say anything about the fight. He just said, "You tell your mom to keep that head up, son. And remember, do what is right, even when no one is watching." The child ran off, and Michael watched him go, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a completed mission. The flashbulbs, the slurs, the arrests, it had all been loud and chaotic, but the real work, the persistence, the collection of evidence in the old notebook, that had been the quiet work of a man who remembered where he came from. He finished his coffee, paid his tab, and walked out into the strong morning light. He knew the fight against arrogance and hypocrisy never truly ends, but he also knew his small corner of the world was now safer, more honest, and a little more just because he had refused to turn his old truck around. He had paid a price, but his opponents had paid the highest price of all: their masks, their power, and their pride. The storm had broken, and Michael B. Jordan was standing in the resulting calm, his principles still intact.